Hello everyone, happy to see you again for this new video in Mexico in the Chiapas region. Today by my side is Viktor Hernandez, who is a well-known archaeological guide in Palenque. Viktor is going to tell us a story of survival. These are events that took place about 50 years ago, and these are real events. You'll see it's a story that's rich in lessons.
My name is Viktor Hernandez, and I started working in archaeology, in history, and in nature. Before arriving in Palenque, it was a bit difficult, with small planes at the market, a lot of juice to get to Palenque. And in 1975, I arrived in Palenque in a Paris coupe. And that's where I encountered survival to guide in Palenque. I'm in Palenque and I started working in archaeology. And before arriving in Palenque, I started archaeology and I started working in archaeology. We take the flight to Palenque, to Bonampak. The flight takes 45 minutes. We arrived in Bonampak. They took the objects out of the plane, they paid the pilot, and the pilot returned to Palenque. The plan is to visit Bonampak and take photos and all that. And we were sleeping in the archaeologist's house in Bonampak. The next days, on Monday, we start the walk there. In Yachilan, there is a little shaman from the Chitleros. The Chitleros are the groups who scrape the trees to get the sap to make chewing gum. And we walked on Monday and Tuesday. Afterwards, the woman said we had changed our minds. He told me we would leave the shamans and go straight ahead. He told me there was the compass, and the man was looking at the topographic map, and I go first, then the man, then his wife. And we were put in the thick vegetation, like here. And after 30 minutes, the man asks, "Where's the compass?" And the woman dropped the compass, and we were lost for 8 days. 3 days we were lost in the same place, and 5 days without a good direction. And we had meat planned for 3 days, and after 5 days, nothing to eat. After that, they stay busy with plants, like here. And we were eating chapelle. Chives are palm trees. First, there are thorns, and chives, they smooth things out. We were cooked the little fruits, and to see, there is no spring, there is no river. And I cut some vines to see the water. We were lost for days. And the problem for me is that every night it comes very close to us. 2 or 3 jaguars offer food. Leave me, who sleep 2 or 3 hours at most. And after the rest of the night, I stopped the jaguars because they were coming to offer food. We were found gathered for the jaguars. Wild boars, armadillos, goats, lots of animals and tree snakes, snakes, corals, and big tarantulas. People sleep in hammocks. We were put in plastic to avoid the rain. And just like that, 8 days later, we were out. I'm a small mark of the people who were hunted. And I followed that passage, and just like that, we were out 8 days later. And after that, we were out on the right paths. We're completely lost. And then, the people who 3 days earlier had gone to Guatemala to buy sugar, matches, and kerosene arrived. And we were just hands. We'll go out later. People, they say, "Are you the leader of the Guatemalan guerrilla?" And I explain to them we were tourists, and people say, "No, are you the leader of the Guatemalan guerrilla?" Afterward, they understand nothing and don't believe it. Then I have the city. We were lost because of the duende. After I explained that the duende made us get lost, they understand that we have tourists. They started walking with us, and we walked for about 3 kilometers and started to reach his village, and they gave us directions: tortillas, laricot, piman, and surf. We ate very well, because 5 days before, there was nothing to eat. That was in 1975. The couple traveled from Paris. After we went out, they told me they offered to go straight for the walk, to get the expedition into the Guinness Book of Records. That helped him. Why are we suggesting a straight route with the compass? I use special Goddard structures like that for the jungle. And for France, I use sneakers and structures with cowhide. Like that. And I dressed with my kabui to protect myself from the rain. And the people are completely scared because he said he was going to die in the jungle. And I knew in the jungle the smell of blood, the smell of snake. And at the pond, I smelled the smell of snake. I didn't say anything because if I say it, it won't work. The snakes hiss and crawl and give off a smell like fish. That's how I identified that a snake had passed. It was very close to us. And I didn't say anything because if I say it, it won't work. They're completely scared. At that time, there was the walk for Bonaparte and Jacques Chillon, the people brought there. And as a kid, one of the pockets and the compass. And I brought Mac a plastic sheet to protect from the rain and the machetes, and some good soul to make very bright light. Like this, it works. And then not bad for the Mac, the machetes, and the very strong blades. For depending on the mood at night, because the base turned dark. And in the jungle, if you don't have good light, the animals come really close and you can't see anything. And like that, every night when you go out, 2 or 3 jaguars make noise with the machetes and leave. After 2 or 3 hours, they come back again. And that's it. The problem for me is that I don't sleep, because if we all sleep, they will eat us. That reminds me of Sweden, of Cannes. At that time, there was a lot of vegetation. Then a company arrived that took care of clearing the vegetation to get out of the jungle. The red cedars, the mahogany, the precious wood trunks, mantenado, just the name of the vegetation, the jungle. The Candona moves forward to make dance. And I heard that over there a lot of people get lost like that for a day or two. At that time, we proved everything. The meat, I prepare it, the fish bones, the cans to drink Coca-Cola, the mineral water, all in bottles, and everything to eat. The dried meat. A bunch of fake jars that laugh. And after we drew the meat, there was nothing to eat. And we were eating for 5 days. I was completely lost. I cut the tibets. It was a leaf similar to chapes, and it was smaller and didn't have thorns. They give fruit. We cut them open and ate them with the small rooms inside. And to drink, I cut a lot of flesh to collect the water, 1 or 2 liters. And we used sugar, coffee, and milk like that. We drank. People enjoy taking you out. You went out and they're not in love me. And completely lost contact. Never. What happened? And these are people who are roughly between 50, 60 years old. And at that time, I was 25 years old.
So now we're going to debrief about this episode where Viktor Damas was a survival guide in the jungle in Mexico, and it took place in 1975. We typically organize feedback sessions into 3 main categories. First, you have the human aspect, everything related to people, then everything related to equipment, and finally everything related to the environment. So let's start with the human aspect. The first problem related to people is the issue of having multiple decision makers. Do you have a moment? The decision to change the route and go through the forest, a sharp azimuth. So you need to know that in a hostile environment, the chain of command must be very well structured. There needs to be coherence in the commands. So there, you had 3 people, you had a guide. He was the most experienced and he should have managed the situation from A to Z. Having multiple decision makers creates problems. They were there at the beginning and at the root of all their problems. The second problem they encountered, which relates to people, was meeting the Mexicans in the forest, who ultimately saved them. So Viktor Damas told me from the start, people took them for Guatemalan rebels and they wanted to kill the Parisian, especially the Parisian. So it's thanks to Viktor Damas who told them, because he knew the beliefs and the mindset of the people they met. It's thanks to the negotiation that he managed to get out of it. But they barely made it. Getting executed in the middle of the forest was very easy. So you can see that in nature, if you have fundamental knowledge, you'll be able to get by quite easily. Because a lot of things are predictable. On the other hand, the determining factor, the one that opens up, that's the most dangerous, the most unpredictable, is the human factor. It's the people you will encounter. Third, Viktor Damas says people never wrote or contacted him again. So in that case, you shouldn't expect anything different. You have the firefighters, the sea rescuers, and so on. They know it perfectly well. When you save someone's life, you have a 5% chance that this person will be grateful to you. 95% of people will erase that from their minds. They will go into denial and you will never see them again. The other 5% will send you a bottle of champagne every year. So you shouldn't expect anything else in this kind of situation. Usually you won't see those people anymore. One last thing, it's when Viktor Damas senses the presence of snakes around him. So he knows it because he has experienced it. But since people were in a state of total fear and must have been tired, it must have been a bit problematic. On a relational level, he preferred not to tell them anything, and it was a wise decision. When you have people who start to get scared, make sure you can handle the situation. At that point, it's better not to spread fear or problems that they aren't even aware of. Now, regarding equipment, the big category of equipment. So the first thing we can say is that they've lost their compass. So back then in 1975, of course, they didn't have global positioning system, but having a backup compass would have been good. They needed at least 2 compasses. So that's the first thing. Then they had brought food for 3 days. So food for 3 days, they had a trip planned for 3 days. That's good. There was a problem with the fire. They had nothing to make a fire. So they couldn't cook any food. They couldn't cook anything. In the jungle, even though there are plenty of things in the jungle that can be cooked and then eaten. So that's definitely quite a significant mistake. They only had prepared food, canned goods, and so on. You can clearly see that they had really extremely basic equipment. Back then it wasn't as advanced as it is today. The equipment wasn't as technical. Obviously they had a plastic top, a basic hammock. Let's say it's decent, although we can definitely do better today. Much better when you properly prepare an expedition. He must have had ropes and string. He didn't say it, but it's necessary to set up hammocks and tarps. Then regarding the shoes. So he had combat boots, so he had good shoes, especially against snakes. Because still in those jungles, the main problem is snake bites, which are really the most dangerous thing. The other animals generally run away when you arrive. And then the Parisians, they were wearing sneakers. Maybe the lady was wearing sneakers, and that's definitely a bit too light. They were really right to put her in the back. So regarding the environment now, so a first thought was the decision, the famous decision to go in a straight azimuth. So let me remind you, a straight azimuth is when you go straight through the forest using a compass, a magnetic compass or a global positioning system. So you should know that you have a ratio of 1 to 10 in terms of progress. Between someone who goes in a straight azimuth through the forest and someone who uses the trails. So you should know that in those forests you often have hunter or gatherer trails. Those are the best. But you also have what are called monkey trails, meaning trails that last 20 meters, 30 meters, sometimes 100 meters. Those are animal paths used by animals, but often they're easy to use and it's worth taking them. So that was a bad idea. Honestly, they would have been much better off sticking to the trails clearly. The second thought is the problem with jaguars. So you should know that when you're in a hostile environment as a group, what's important is the group's resilience. You have to preserve the group. So it's not about overloading one person and making them do all the guarding, even the most experienced one in this case. So they should have set up a watch rotation and kept a fire going all night, which would have allowed them to avoid all the jaguars pretty easily. A couple more thoughts. They saw many animals. Obviously they tell us this so they couldn't hunt. When roaming like that, hunting is possible, but you must be armed with a firearm, otherwise it's not. It's almost impossible to easily trap animals while roaming. So the last thing is that we can see they still cut some vines. So he must have cut a lot of them because it's not easy. Besides, there are techniques, but obviously they knew them. They took some chapelle. So chapelle are small spiky palm trees that have little berries. Depending on the season, you can eat or drink from them. Chivet are also small palm trees. So here you really need to know the plants in the forest. So when you don't know them, the basics, the technique is to focus on palm trees and bamboo, ferns possibly. Almost all ferns are edible, especially the young leaves, only the young shoots. But anyway, there are a lot of them in the forest, many varieties that are generally edible. You have to test them. So you have vines for water, you have bamboo. Bamboo is generally all good, the shoots, etc. If you find any, they're not always present. Plus there are many types of palm trees. There's only one whose berries are toxic, and even then they're not deadly. But most palm trees, either at the cabbage level, what we call the cabbage, at the trunk or at the shoots, all of that is generally very edible. There you go. We've now covered this review of experience. I hope it was valuable. Lessons for you, and I'll see you soon for another video.